All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again, of course, for following the Victorious Ones podcast. My name is Kane Vaughn Jr., and of course, here I am to present another installment of my NBA Top 10 series. And of course, we're near the finish line. This time, we are dealing with the top 10 power forwards of all time. So, there was certain positions that I would say, were more debatable than others. Um, but for the most part, I've already formulated this list naturally, already. For the most with many of my lists, for that matter. And so, of course, I'm going to start off like I do, going from 10 to 1. Sorry about that. Of course, like I said, I'm starting off, going from 10 to 1. And in this case, starting off at number 10, was definitely a pick. The number 10 was kind of debatable. I was kind of going back and forth between certain names, but the more I looked into this guy's uh, impact on the game, um, his resume, not just when it comes to championships, obviously, but also, when it comes to individual accolades like MVPs, a certain run of level of dominance that he had, that he had, and so I'll have to go with number 10. You could make this guy power forward, stretch four. Some may consider him a center, kind of varies back and forth, like several people on this list. This one is none other than Bob McAdoo. And the reason why I'm choosing Bob McAdoo is because of the fact that, of course, he was a five-time All-Star. He was the league MVP in 1975. He was a three-time scoring champion. Of course, with the scoring, peaking out like 34.5 points per game, I believe, during the other 1974-75 season. And so, so of course, later on in his career, he had become, later on in his career, of course, he became a two-time NBA champion with the Los Angeles Lakers. So, like I say, he's a three-time scoring champion, but between 1974 through 76, what I mean. So, of course, he made the All NBA first team in 75 and second team in 74. So, like I said, of course, with this. As far as McAdoo, had it not been for injuries, his numbers would definitely look significantly different. They certainly look better than what they turned out to be. So he's about a shade under 20,000 points for his career. So with that being said, McAdoo is number 10 on my list. Number 9, a Washington Bullets / Wizards legend. As well as you could say, like one of Houston's original legends. He's the first overall pick in 1968. Of course. Let me slow down. Of course, with that being said, and I'll say in college, this guy's biggest claim to fame was the victory that he had as the Houston Cougars defeated Lou Alcindor, later Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's UCLA Bruins, 71-69 to snap UCLA's 47-game winning streak. This is also known as the game of the century. And so, this game, earned him the moniker, Sporting News College Basketball Player of the Year. So, like I said, this guy's biggest claim to fame in college was the fact that his team broke UCLA's 47-game winning streak at the time, and of course, this guy's one of the all-time leading scorers with over 27,000 points. And like I said, he's the first overall pick for at that time the San Diego Rockets, later on the Houston Rockets. But like I said, his greatest claim to fame, his greatest legacy took place here in the nation's capital, the DC area, with the Baltimore, then later on Washington Bullets. Of course, where he was instrumental in helping the other Bullets win their only NBA championship in 1978. So of course, this guy's a 12-time NBA All-Star. Of course, he made the All NBA first team at least 3 times, or the second team 3 times, all defensive team twice. Of course, like I say, he was a scoring. He's actually the scoring champion his rookie season. And so, of course, he was a 2-time rebounding leader between 1970 and 74. And this guy, and of course, like I said, when it came to scoring, he was certainly the face, um, of that Bullets franchise. And that, without further ado, not to prolong this anymore, I'm talking about none other than the Big E himself, the original Big E, Elvin Hayes. And so of course, Elvin Hayes made both the NBA 50th and 75th anniversary teams. McAdoo just made the 75th anniversary team. He should have been on the 50th, but the NBA, of course, did what was right, and of course, the NBA did what was right, and put him on the 75th team. And so of course, so is the Big E, Elvin Hayes. And so of course, at number 8, I'm going to have to go with a guy that you could consider to be sort of like the quintessential um, sidekick, like a quintessential like six man, one of the greatest low post players in NBA history, and the fact that this guy was a 3-time NBA champion, and he was very instrumental when it came to, of course, when it came to that Boston Celtics 80s dynasty, along with Larry Bird and Robert Parrish. This guy was a seven-time All-Star. He was, of course, made the All NBA first team in '87. He was a 3-time All Defensive first team member, three-time All Defensive second team member. He was a 2-time Sixth Man of the Year in '84 and '85. Of course, he was named to the 50th and 75th anniversary teams, rightfully so. And he's somebody that was certainly one of the is very instrumental in that heated Lakers Celtics rivalry. Especially with that Game 4 clothesline on Kurt Rambis. Now you already know who I'm talking about. This guy's certainly a Hall of Famer, as well as the other players on my list and future Hall of Famers, coming up pretty soon. But like I said, this guy's already in the Hall of Fame, and I'm referring to none other than Kevin McHale. And Kevin McHale is a guy that Charles Barkley has gone on record to saying that this is the toughest guy that he ever played against, the toughest guy that that he's ever had to guard, or like I said, just generally playing against, especially considering the fact that that McHale play power forward, the same position as Barkley. So it wasn't him taking anything away from Jordan when he said that, but just when it came to specifically players that played the same position as him. You know what I mean? So of course, like I said, Kevin McHale was certainly one of the more elite players of that generation of the 80s. You know what I mean? I would say he was second on, at least probably like on the second tier. When it came to the more elite players of that time. And so it just so happened that that as great as McHale was, of course, when you have a shadow as large as Larry Bird's, who was certainly the driving figure, the face of that franchise. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's hard for me to rank you even higher than where I have you right now. Just by the fact that you played in the shadow of somebody who's a Boston icon. But that takes nothing away from Kevin McHale's own greatness. So for that, I have him at number 8. At number 7, I have somebody who was certainly a building block when it comes to the early years of the NBA. A guy who was, who's like at the time the prototype for power forwards. He's still widely regarded as one of the greatest power forwards of all time. He's also the first player to score more than 20,000 career points in NBA history. Obviously, he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, and so like I said, he was an NBA champion in 1958. A member of at that time the St. Louis Hawks, and of course his championship came at the expense of defeating Bill Russell's Boston Celtics. So of course Russell is 11-1 in the finals, and the one loss that he has in the finals came from this guy and his team. And of course, this guy referring to, he's also a 2-time MVP in 1956 and 1959, 11-time All-Star. So he was an All-Star each and every season of his career. He was a 4-time All-Star Game MVP, 10-time All-NBA first team. That just shows you how dominant he was at his position at that time. You could argue that of course I'm pretty sure that there are people that they'll argue that that at that time there wasn't as much competition at that position, but still, just adjusting for error. That's certainly pretty valuable. Obviously, he was a rookie of the year during his time. He was a two-time NBA scoring champion, and he was also a rebounding leader. And of course, he was a member of the top 50 team, top 75 team, and a few other, a couple of other NBA all-time teams like 25th, 35th anniversary or whatever. And of course, he was also LSU's first superstar long before the likes of Pete Maravich and Shaquille O'Neal. And like I said, this was the quintessential pioneer, sort of building block player when it came to the power forward position. And of course, this is none other than Bob Pettit. So of course, I have Bob Pettit at number 7, just because of his impact, because of his resume. For that time, he was all-star every single. Of course, he was all-star every single year of his career. And of course, his career was cut short because of an injury. And so, so of course, at that time, clearly they didn't have the same, advanced medicine and equipment and everything like that to, to help players recover. So, so of course, of course, at that time, if he had a certain injury, career was finished. So, but with that said, I have Pettit at number 7. At number 6, yeah, we're getting close to it. We're reaching the halfway point of this top 10 list, and at number 6, this guy, of course, he has taken the NBA by storm recently. Obviously, he's the leader of this Milwaukee Bucks championship team last year, 2021. Had a phenomenal series in the finals, averaged like 35, 13 and 5 or something. Of course, capped off with a sensational 50-point game in Game 6. Of course, I mentioned this in my top, of course, in my greatest NBA Finals episode, if you will. And so, and of course, this guy is a 6-time NBA. Of course, like I say, he's an NBA champion from 2021. He's also the Finals MVP because of that legendary performance. Like I said, he's NBA champion, Finals MVP, 2-time league MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. He was, of course, he's also has an All-Star Game MVP award, 6-time NBA All-Star. So really, 2021 was his flagship year because he won the championship, he won the Finals MVP, and he also won the All-Star Game MVP, all in the same season. Of course, to go along, like as I said just now, a 6-time NBA All-Star. He made 4 All NBA first teams, 4 consecutive first teams from his first 2 MVP seasons to his championship seasons to this past season, where he was unanimously selected to the All NBA first team. In fact, he had 100% of the votes, even more votes than Joker himself, who won the MVP award. So of course, he was also a 2-time All NBA second team member, a 4-time All Defensive first team member. Of course, he was also named the most improved player in 2017. And he's also, of course, recently named to the NBA's 75th anniversary team, rightfully so. This guy is certainly a future first ballot Hall of Famer. I think that I think at this point, his ticket is already locked in at this point. So I would say, of course, there's still room to grow. Don't get me wrong, but with the trajectory that his career is going, the trajectory that his career has gone thus far, and is still advancing. And the thing is, he's hitting more mountains, hitting more peaks. His game is constantly evolving, constantly advancing. This is a guy who took the Mamba mentality, the Mamba challenge, and completed it. He was successful in completing Kobe's Mamba challenge. So Kobe specifically laid out a challenge to 2 main things: to win the MVP and win the championship. When this guy won the MVP, Kobe said, "Congratulations! Now it's time to win a championship." A year after Kobe's gone, now he's got it. Now he's a champion. So he's checked off both boxes. And of course, the guy that I'm referring to just so happened to be wearing his jersey, and none other than the Greek freak himself, Giannis Antetokounmpo. So, like I said, of course, Giannis is leaving a mark that you cannot, there's no way that you can ignore how phenomenal this guy is and how phenomenal he continues to become. And so, so I would certainly say that this is his era to seize, even though Golden State just won the championship. But when it comes to upside, Giannis certainly has a bigger upside. And in fact, I even did a podcast episode. In fact, I even did a podcast episode about Giannis. Of course, of course, like 2 months ago, called Heart of a Champion. So even though the team lost, he still has a very optimistic outlook. So, so I was just say, as long as he maintains that character, maintains that humility, maintains that competitive drive, like he shows what it takes to be a leader. And so, as long as time is on his side, longevity is on his side, he's certainly going to climb up even higher on this list with the way his trajectory is going. So he's an honorable mention for the fifth spot. So Giannis at number 6. Number 5, an 11-time All-Star. Of course he's a Hall of Famer, a member of the 50th and 75th anniversary teams. Of course of course this guy is certainly become one of the more controversial figures, if you will, in certain ways. And this generation probably knows him more for more knows him just as much for his commentary as his basketball career, almost as much for his commentary, as they know him for his basketball career. But like I said, this guy was phenomenal. He was absolutely incredible. Once again, he was 11-time NBA All-Star. He was named to the All NBA first team 5 times. He was a 5-time All NBA second team selection. He was also an All NBA third team selection. Of course, of course, not only that, he also led the league in rebounding. He was also an All-Star Game MVP, most famously a league MVP. He's also a 2-time. He's also a 2-time gold medal winner as well. And I'm referring to none other than the round mound of rebound, Sir Charles Barkley. And so oftentimes when you talk about Charles Barkley, like the main argument that you have in his case is just how great he was during his prime / peak, but you can make that case for anybody. But like I said, the thing about Charles was just how unique he was. For him to be able to grab so many rebounds for a guy his height, constantly going up against guys much taller than him, much larger than him, and for him to fight for every single rebound, and to play as hard as he did, and and just to have the type of intensity, just to have that sort of like bulldog intensity, if you will, and and just to constantly go for what was his, and like I said, and just for him to have that gift of rebounding, even for someone as undersized as he was, constantly going up against, of course, like I said, not only Kevin McHale's, most famously his greatest rival, Karl Malone, going up against him, your Dennis Rodmans, Chris Webber, so on and so forth, anybody else that played that position. So like, so just in terms of, like I said, just in terms of just him being basically a unicorn in so many different ways. So so for me, I would have to say that and of course, in his case, unfortunately, he ran into of course, the red and black locomotive known as Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in the NBA Finals, and that was the only Finals appearance that Barkley ever made. And of course that season he was named the league MVP in large part because of the fact that and because of the fact that there's so much because of the fact that it was such a huge turnaround for him compared to where he was in the previous season, where the 76ers missed the playoffs, and he was and of course at the time he was certainly demanding a trade, and and of course let me slow down. Of course, during that summer of '92, which is the same summer where he won, with the Dream Team. He was actually the leading scorer on that Dream Team, believe it or not. So of course within that same time frame, he ends up getting traded to the Phoenix Suns, and so the next season, he gets rejuvenated because he hasn't, because of the fact that he has a change of scenery, and so he has a much better team around him, and by that, even though I would have still picked Jordan to be the MVP, but that's whole nother story in and of itself, but still, Barkley certainly made his presence known by winning that MVP. But but of course, knowing how Jordan is the type of competitor that he was and still is, he certainly took that personally, as he was saying the Last Dance, and just lit into the Suns. And so of course, of course after that, Phoenix was still continue to be playoff contenders. Only instead of running into Jordan, they would run into, of course, only time instead of running into Jordan again, they'll end up running into, run into Akeem Olajuwon and the Houston Rockets back-to-back years, with the Rockets would bounce them out. So of course later on, Barkley just, feels like, hey, if you can't beat him, why not join him? So he goes to the Rockets. Of course, we all know how that turns out, whatever, yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, that still does not diminish or negate the impact and the mark that he left on the game. So with that being said, Barkley for right now is still number 5 on my list when it comes to the greatest power forwards. At number 4, now I feel like I'm reaching the Mount Rushmore, you know what I mean, if you will, when it comes to the greatest power forwards of all time. And this guy, of course, speaking of, of course, speaking of Barkley, this guy is another, another one of the more intense, players in NBA history. And I have to say that, that he even turns the dial up even higher than Barkley. I'll say it like this. And so, this guy's catalog reads as this, and like I said, this guy's catalog reads as this. He was the NBA champion in 2008. Of course, he was the NBA's MVP in 2004. He was a 15-time NBA All-Star. He's the All-Star Game MVP. In 2003, he was also a member of 4 All-NBA first teams, 3 All-NBA second teams, and 2 All-NBA third teams. He was named Defensive Player of the Year in 2008. He was a member of 9 All Defensive first teams and 3 All Defensive second teams. He's a 4-time rebounding champion. He was a member of the NBA 75th anniversary, much just like Barkley. And of course, this guy just recently went into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And it was certainly one, I would say it's certainly, one of the more stacked Hall of Fame classes, and probably the best that I've seen so far. And like I said, and the thing is, this guy, this guy just screamed intensity. I'll say it like this. And of course, this guy that I'm referring to was the face of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Even still is the standard for the Timberwolves, the greatest Timberwolf of all time. Who else am I going to name? None other than the big ticket, Kevin Garnett. And so I'll say it like this. If DMX were a basketball player, he would have been Kevin Garnett, hands down. And of course, Garnett obviously does not have the same same type of voice that DMX had. He didn't have the same raspy voice or anything like that. But at the same time, just the type of energy that he carried. Like I said, just the fact that he was a guy that just gave it his all on every single play, in every single game. Like I said, he just maintained that same energy all throughout. And with the way that Garnett carried that Timberwolves team for 12 years, he left his blood, sweat, tears, and everything. And he carried them as far as he could go. And those were his best years, by the way. But it got to a point where Kevin McHale himself knew that this guy was too great to finish his career without a championship. So what does he do? Orchestrates a trade, of course, for KG to have a new change of scenery. And he let's just say, rewrites his story, has a whole new, I'll say it like this, rewrites the history of his career, has a great second chapter this time, of course, aligning with 2 other top 75 players, Paul Pierce and Ray Allen with the Boston Celtics. And, of course, from jump, they certainly made their presence known. They were not going to be stopped. And of course, that first season, they end up winning the championship. Unfortunately, it was at the expense of my Los Angeles Lakers. And that was Kobe's only MVP season. And so, but at the same time, it was something about the Celtics that could not be stopped. They had too much momentum on their side. That season, they had too much to prove, and Garnett was the anchor for that. He was the central figure of that, even though he did not win Finals MVP. But we all know collectively, um, all across the board, who the better overall player was. Just happens that Pierce in that series had at least edged him out, but at the same time, like I said, when it comes to the more important uh, play, I'll say when it comes to me, the more important player of that team at that time was certainly Kevin Garnett. And you know what I mean? Like it's just so much that could be said about KG. You know what I mean? Like I said, he like, and the thing about it is that with the way that he dominated in the era that he played in, when he had dance partners like Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki, even Chris Webber, you know what I mean? Like, like that, and just to have that, like just to have that deep sort of, just to have a talent pool that deep, and and for KG to stand out the way that he did was certainly remarkable, and he's done enough, more than enough, to make himself known and recognized when it comes to the history of the NBA. So for that, Garnett will always be in my Mount Rushmore of power forwards, until further notice, until at least until otherwise. So at number, of course, at number 3, 2 and 3, much like how I've done with any other list, there's always going to be a point where that there's a certain like kind of like a point of contention. I have to wrestle with certain picks and things like that, but I realize that I still have to get just throw it out there. So at number 3, so I'll say it like this: for a long time, this guy was considered the standard when it came to power forwards. For a long time, this guy, certainly made a case to be the greatest power forward of all time, at least until the big fundamental in San Antonio arrived and snatched that title away from him. But of course, recently LeBron James just passed him on the NBA's all-time scoring list, and so now this guy's third all-time in scoring with 36,928 career points. And so, so of course, during his time, this guy was the blueprint, the standard. Like when it came to power forwards, this guy was the perennial best power forward of his generation. And so so his accolades are this: he's a 2-time NBA MVP. Of course, and I'll certainly say those MVPs have a certain cloud of controversy surrounding him, especially the first one. And of course, he's a 14-time NBA All-Star, 2-time All-Sstar Game MVP, 11-time All-NBA first team member, 2-time All-NBA second team member. He was also named to the All-NBA third team. He was a member. He was part of the All-NBA, part of the All-Defensive first team 3 times. He was on the All-Defensive second team once. And so, I'll say like this: he's certainly the face of the Utah Jazz, like when it comes to all time. He is to the Jazz what Kevin Garnett was to the Timberwolves. And this guy, was like I said, the perennial, perennial sort of franchise player. But especially when you look at the way the fans analyze the game, even now, I would say that that there's certain things about his resume, about his legacy, that come into question. Primarily because of the fact that for most of his career, he had a transcendent, all-time top 75 point guard feeding him the ball. So, there's certain critics that look at that kind of sideways, really. But I'll say, the most controversial part about him, once again, as I said before, with those MVP awards, especially when it came to the 1997 MVP award. And this is, certainly I think this is certainly the part in The Last Dance where Jordan really took it personally, and took it personally. He did, and of course, dashed the hopes and dreams of the Utah Jazz and and their fan base by destroying this team back-to-back seasons. And then later on, he tried, at least tried for one last time to chase that ring, and joined up with the 2004 Lakers at the time with Kobe, Shaq, and Gary Payton, only for them only for them to get smoked. But of course, by the 2004 Bad Boy Pistons, 4 games to 1. And so like and of course, um, as I've said, when it comes to controversy, this guy is certainly no stranger to controversy. If you don't believe me, just go ahead and just add. If you don't believe me, I said like this. This guy was certainly no stranger to controversy in other ways. If you don't believe me, just go ask NBA Twitter. Just go ask Black Twitter about him, and yeah, of course, and of course, they'll certainly let you know. Certainly let you know how they feel about him. And it's not in a very endearing light, if you will. We just leave it at that. And the guy that I'm talking about, of course, with all this anticipation, is none other than the mailman, Karl Malone. You know, and and once again, another, let's say, point of controversy was when he famously knocked out Isaiah Thomas with the elbow and gave him like 40 to 44 stitches or something like that. You know what I mean. So so of course this guy was no stranger when it came to aggressiveness, when it came to just being a trash talker, being a trash talker. No stranger when it came to dirty play and all things like that. And so like I said, it's just that it was kind of hard for me to decide between him and the number 2 pick. Um, you know what I mean? And I think one of the things that that hits me was just in terms of just the stamp on the game. I feel like Karl Malone's stamp on the game is slowly starting to fade in several different ways, especially with the way that the game is with the way that the game has constantly been transforming. That and also with the skepticism that that so many fans have, because his career has been so tightly linked to having somebody like John Stockton, like I said, constantly dishing out the rock. So of course, like I said, not to belabor, I have the mailman at number 3, and at number 2, this guy was to the Dallas Mavericks what Karl Malone was to to the Utah Jazz, what Garnett was to the Timberwolves, Duncan to the Spurs. Spoiler alert. So of course, um, I would have to say that at least within the past decade, he has had arguably probably the toughest road to a championship in NBA history. And it was certainly one of the greatest playoff runs outside of like Olajuwon from '95. And during this 2011 run, um, this guy led his team to run through the Portland Trailblazers that were led by Brandon Roy and LaMarcus Aldridge, the back-to-back champion Lakers team led by Kobe, Pau Gasol, and company. And not only did they beat the Lakers, but it was the way that they beat them in just convincing, dominated, unbelievable fashion. It was ridiculous. And so, if of course, not only that, but also with the way that they dispatched a young OKC team led by Kevin Durant, along with Russell Westbrook and James Harden. You know, and of course, let me slow down. And of course, last but not least, dismantling that Miami Heat team, led by the big three of LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, in large part because of LeBron's meltdown. And so because of that, this guy certainly sees that window of opportunity and just turn his game up past 11. Shout out to Spinal Tap. But yeah, like I said, this guy, this guy was certainly a game changer. And when I say game changer, he changed the game, especially when it came to um, I say like this. I say like this guy was a game changer because of how he revolutionized the stretch four when it came to power forwards. He was a revolutionary when it came to big men shooting more 3-pointers. When it came to he revolutionized things, especially when it came to let's say like the modern day version of the NBA, especially when it comes to big men. And of course his signature shot is his signature shot is that fadeaway with that one-legged fadeaway. And of course recently his number was retired by the Mavericks. And sorry about that, excuse me. Recently sorry about that, let me slow down. Recently he had his number retired by the number retired by the Mavericks, along with a statue as well. And so this guy, for his career, has over 30,000 career points, 31,560 to be exact. And his accolades are this: he's a 2011 NBA champion, along with being the Finals MVP of that series. He was the NBA's MVP back in 2007. He's a 14-time NBA All-Star, member of 4 All-NBA first teams, 5 All-NBA second teams, a member of 3 All-NBA third teams. In 2007, the MVP season, he was named to the 50, 40, and 90 club. 50% from the floor, 40% from the three-point line, and 90% from the 90% from the free throw line. 50% from the floor, 40 from three, and 90, of course, 90% from the free throw line. Of course, in 2006, he was the NBA three-point champion. What I mean. So, and of course, rightfully so, he was named to the NBA's 75th anniversary team. And of course, side note, I want to backtrack when it comes to Karl Malone. Karl Malone is also a member of two Olympic teams from 92, 96. But back to this one, like I said, when it comes to this guy, it's just like I said, just the stamp, just the overall stamp that he left on the game, and certainly what he means to the Dallas Mavericks. For him to deliver that championship was certainly monumental, and considering the level of competition that he had at that time. You know what I mean? And like I said, this guy is certainly the stuff of legend, and he's gone toe to toe with the best, from Duncan to Garnett, and certainly held his own. And of course, I'm talking about none other than Dirk Nowitzki. That is my number 2 power forward. And the reason why I give him the edge over Karl Malone, I had a conversation with somebody earlier about this, and the reason why I give him the edge was because the fact that Dirk showed that he can. Dirk showed that he can dominate without having to heavily rely on on his top 75 point guard by his side for the majority of his career. When Steve Nash left and went to Phoenix, and became the player that he became, Dirk actually got better. Dirk stepped his game up, amped his game up to a whole nother level, to the point where even after Nash left, Dirk was able to lead the Mavericks to the finals twice. First time they lost to the Heat. Second time, sorry about that. Like I said, first time they lost to the Heat. The second time they won. So Dirk has won the finals, and this is after Nash had left. So for him to do that without needing the help of without needing the help of one of the game's greatest point guards for most of his career, I think that's separation right there. For him to do the things that he did, for him to dominate the way that he did, for him to beat his opponents sort of like off the dribble and lure them away, lure his defenders away from the basket, even though he was clearly not the greatest defender. Even he would admit that. But what he lacked in defense, he made up for in other areas. He made up for when it came to his offensive dominance, when it came to his repertoire, if you will, when it came to his leadership, when it came to just bringing the best out of his teammates, in so many different areas. So because of that, and once again, just how transcendent he was, when it, of course, when it comes to 3-point shooting, like I say, he's a very monumental figure. When it comes to like the modern NBA, modern NBA fans, and really just the game itself, in general now. So with that being said, Dirk Nowitzki is number 2 on my list, and number 1, I think it's a no-brainer. This guy is like head and shoulders above so many other guys that I just named, with all due respect to them. But like I said, his resume just blows so many other players out the water. He's hands down, locked down, guaranteed top 10 player of all time. And his resume reads as this. Of course, his resume reads as this. He was the first overall pick in the 1997 NBA draft by the San Antonio Spurs. At a time, of course, certainly at a time that the Spurs needed rejuvenation, because of Dave Robinson's back injury, and everything like that. So they needed somebody to to bring new life to this team and be the future that the Spurs needed. So with that being said, he was of course sorry about that. And so of course upon his arrival, him and Robinson formed the Twin Towers, and so for his first 6 years from this guy's first 6 years from 97 to 03, you know what I mean, so it's certainly one of the greater dynamic duos still in NBA history. But with all that being said, here's accolades. He's a five-time NBA champion from 99, 03, 05, 07, and 2014. He's a five-time NBA champion, three-time Finals MVP in 99, 2003, 2005, two-time NBA MVP from 2002 and 2003. He's a 15-time NBA All-Star. He's an All-Star Game MVP back in 2000. He's a 10-time All-NBA first team member, three-time All-NBA second team member, two-time All-NBA third team member, eight-time, he's a member, 8-time all defensive first team member, 7-time all defensive second team member. Of course, he was the Rookie of the Year, obviously. And with that being said, I find that it's criminal that this guy never ever won a Defensive Player of the Year. As dominant as this dude was, and so so with that being said, he's forever the face of the San Antonio Spurs. He transformed the culture, and obviously took the torch from David Robinson and formed his own legacy. Rewrote Spurs history books. Just transformed. Just completely changed the face of the franchise, changed the culture, turned them into a dynasty. And this guy, and you can certainly make an argument for this guy to like I said, you can make an argument for him to be the best player of that decade, arguably. Arguably, other than Kobe and Shaq, but at the same time, like I said, and this guy was certainly the standard of fundamentals, to the point where Shaq even nicknamed him the Big Fundamental. And of course, that bank shot led him to 5 championships, and that of course that bank shot led him to 26,496 career points. And of course, I'm on the defensive side. He also has 15,091 rebounds. You know what I mean? So this guy, was just, like I said, a consummate, like consummate professional, a guy who had dignity, a guy who had integrity. You know what I mean? He's the ultimate ambassador, if you will, and that is none other than the standard of power forwards, the greatest power forward of all time. It's this guy and everybody else. And that is none other than Tim Duncan, first ballot Hall of Famer, member of the NBA 75th anniversary team, a perennial top 10 player of all time. And if Tim Duncan is not in your top 10, you really need to evaluate your knowledge of NBA history, if you will. You really need to reevaluate how much of the game that you truly know, because you cannot talk about NBA history and not talk about Tim Duncan. I know people criticize his game because they consider it boring, but at the same time, it was effective. It was consistency. Tim Duncan was the model and standard of consistency. You know what I mean? And so, so because of him, the San Antonio Spurs became one of the NBA's greatest dynasties of all time. So with that being said, hands down, the GOAT of power forwards, certainly. And of course, his jersey is certainly on my list of jerseys that I want to get next. But without question, number one, obviously, Tim Duncan. So of course that is my list of the greatest power forwards of all time. Thank you very much for watching. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe for more content.